Chancellor Wilson, President Gertler, Principal Ainsley, Principal Kidd, deans and faculty members, graduates, family members, and guests. Let me start by expressing a most sincere thank you to the University of Toronto for conferring on me today an Honorary Doctor of Laws degree. As a graduate of U of T and a longtime graduate student, this is a recognition that is particularly meaningful to me, and I will treasure it forever. I'm delighted to join this year's very distinguished group of honorary degree recipients who come from the realms of science, medicine, the arts, business, and public service. And I'm particularly pleased to note that the university has included two of us from the world of sport, Chantal Petitclerc and myself, as much, I believe, a tribute to our activism as our accomplishments on the field of play. I want to extend congratulations to each and every one of you receiving your degree today. Perhaps there are those among you who were able to breeze through the academic requirements culminating in this important milestone. But a more likely scenario is that there was a lot of hard work and diligent effort involved, and you have succeeded. Congratulations. When I left university, I thought most certainly I would never have to subject myself to the despair of cramming for an exam, horrified by the possibility that I had understood at best only half the material covered in the course. Surely, I thought to myself, I have seen the last of those endless all-nighters required to bone up for exams or complete term papers on time. Regrettably, I can safely tell you that if you think when you leave today with your degree in hand you will have left this kind of prodigious effort behind you, you are mistaken. Anything worth accomplishing will more than likely require considerable amounts of determination, commitment, and energy, some of it under daunting pressure. I was privileged, as I'm sure you have been, to have had many outstanding professors. I don't know if it's fair to say that the mid-60s and 70s, my era at U of T, were the golden age of political economy at University of Toronto, but my good fortune in the range of courses and professors who were also wonderful teachers made me believe it to be the case. In their unique ways, each had the capacity to stimulate curiosity about events, ideas, ways of understanding the past, the present, and future possibilities. Some professors, of course, I actually found infuriating, either because the subject or their approach seemed inscrutable, or because I didn't agree with their point of view. But I remember them well for their ability to provoke and stimulate new ideas. And for that reason, I recall many of their lectures just as well as those of my more favored professors. You may think that you will soon forget what you have learned and the professors who taught your courses. My prediction is that you will not. And I will go further to say that you shouldn't try to put your undergraduate education behind you as if it were just a stepping stone to graduate studies, further training in a profession, or a job. More likely than not, you will discover connections between your courses, subsequent personal events, subsequent personal experiences, and events unfolding in the real world you hadn't imagined. In Bruce Kidd's very generous introductory remarks, he made reference to a Hart House plaque commemorating my efforts to break into the then Mel bastion that was Hart House. The plaque reads, among other things, "Only she who attempts the absurd can achieve the impossible." This is a statement about change, about challenging norms which seem natural, acceptable, or at least defensible to some people, but which to others seem absurd, if not downright ridiculous. In my case, absurd fit because the restriction I challenged was the very simple idea that an individual, or worse, a class of people, could be prevented from doing something very ordinary. To be specific, running counterclockwise around an indoor oval, entirely because of their gender. To me, this was an obvious offense to the most basic notions of fairness and equality. Today, it is hard to imagine there was a time when women were not allowed to use Hart House sport facilities. and permitted to attend cultural events only when specifically invited or accompanied by appropriate individuals, i.e. male, or at specified hours, or via designated entrances. I knew about these provisions through notices of upcoming Hard House events published in the Varsity. I thought it was rather quaint until I realized this wasn't a joke, nor a good-humored attempt to recreate a Victorian moral standard. And I thought it particularly outlandish as this wonderful building, with its offending provisions, was located just a few feet from that center, maybe epicenter of liberal thinking, University College, which I had quite deliberately chosen for that very quality. I believed, and it was true, that UC welcomes students of any religious, political, or social persuasion. And having been raised in a family of serial nonconformists, and with every intent of continuing that family tradition, UC seemed like the right place for me, and it was. The physical proximity of the two institutions, however, UC and Hard House, counterpointed by this vast difference in values, just added to the absurdity of the situation. As Bruce Kidd has mentioned, I have spent most of my life involved in sport in one form or another, as an athlete, advocate, policymaker, professional administrator, and volunteer. In addition to pursuing my own personal competitive goals, I have been driven by two important values: fairness and excellence. Along the way, I experienced or observed many things that struck me intuitively as just plain wrong. Wrong because they embodied fundamental unfairness, or because they blunted the motivation and aspirations of people striving for excellence. Some things were so wrong, so unfair, that they had to be challenged and changed. In tackling these issues, my interest in sport was elevated from a purely personal passion to something more meaningful, and I hope of larger social worth. It wasn't always popular to tackle these issues. It took courage and energy, and some of the methods chosen by me and my colleagues were unconventional, to say the least. In my pre-tweet, pre-crowdsourcing era, sit-ins and strikes were more popular. And I won't go into my adventures in that regard next door at Simcoe Hall. I want to mention in particular the leadership and contributions of Bruce Kidd, my friend and co-conspirator on so many fronts. We won a lot of battles. We didn't win them all. Others may judge whether our causes were the most important issues to tackle, but they were the ones that were obvious to us, and they emerged from our experiences and our environment. Let me say a word about excellence. Through sport, I have been exposed to individuals of outstanding personal accomplishment who did things no one thought possible. I can say without reservations that the ones who made the greatest mark were not necessarily the ones with the greatest natural talent. I have seen many individuals with tremendous natural gifts and the potential for great achievement. But those who fulfilled that promise were generally the ones with the greatest passion for their sport, the ones who were disciplined, resolute, and focused on making the best use of whatever talents they had. They were, above all, committed. There is a lesson here for all of us. Make full use of the talents you have, and do not be afraid to test yourself. You will find yourself capable of exceeding what you previously believed were your limits. The social norms and values underpinning our society today are a product of all that has gone before us. Our notions of what is fair, of how much equality or inequality is acceptable, of how we should treat our fellow human beings, our responsibilities to family, to our communities, to civil society, and to strangers, how we interact with our physical environment, and our sense of what we should accept and what we should challenge is a product of our upbringing, our education, the views of opinion leaders and people we respect. But it's also a product of our imagination, our curiosity, and our willingness to consider alternatives. We need only check the internet or watch the news or just take a good look around us to know that we haven't yet got all things quite right. There is still work to be done by young people with fresh ideas and a sense of social justice. Few of us are in a position to tackle head-on the enormous global problems we hear about every day. But the enormity of these issues should not lead to the conclusion that complacency is the right value for our times, or that passive acceptance of the status quo is the right approach to life. It is not. Far from it. Far from it. Each of us, each of you, can make meaningful change in your own immediate environment. So what I commend to you is the following. If you are observant, if you are curious, you will see in whatever activities you pursue, be they professional or avocational, situations and ways of doing business that may reflect current convention, but which intuitively or on reflection you will know are fundamentally wrong, unfair, or adverse for your community or the larger society. You can let these opportunities to make change pass by, or you can say to yourself, it is my turn to contribute to the greater good and to social progress by advocating for meaningful change or making the change directly if it is within your means to do so. We need young people with energy and vision to push for change. You can decide if it is your turn. Each and every one of you has talent, aptitude, and an interest in accomplishing great things in your life and your profession, whatever that turns out to be. You would not be here today if that were not the case. Recognize the talents you have and put them to good use. Do not undervalue them and do not underuse them. You likely know a great deal more than you think. Lest you forget, one of the skills you've acquired at U of T and in all of your formal education to date is the ability to learn, to see things in a new light and to question. And this may be your most valuable, enduring asset. So let me conclude by wishing you the very best in all that you choose to pursue in life. My hope is that your concept of success includes keen observation of the world you inhabit and a commitment to things you know can make not just your world, but the broader community a better place. Congratulations again. Thank you.